The wrath of a parent protecting their child is biblical. I stole that line from an obscure horror movie that wasn't memorable apart from that single statement, but it still rings true. That leads me to this entry in my Mad Musings, the horror game Little Fears by Fun Sized Games. This is a tough one, guys, because it fully embraces the ultimate adult fear, losing a child. Here you play as children facing monsters that only they can see, that hunt them for sport or worse. This is a game where adults are useless, unable to see the horrors that hunt their children, leaving it up to the little ones to fight the battle alone. I'm Mr. Welch, and it's time to confront our childhood fears. I won't lie, this review is going to disturb some people. Little Fears pulls no punches at all. You are playing children from 6 to 12 who still possess a degree of innocence. That makes the game even bleaker. The monsters are deadly, the children are fragile, and death is very much a possibility. And that is if you are lucky. If you want to follow this up with something lighter, might I suggest the Black Pants Legion. It's a channel that's helped me through some difficult times recently and has done me more than a few solids. They cover a lot of video games, including Cyberpunk 2077 that I helped co-narrate with Mr. Tex, as us gravelly-voiced Texans have to stick together. There's also a lot of other gaming content, including some of the best information regarding the Battletech universe. It's good for a laugh, and if you're having a bad day, check out Steiner Scout Squad. Tex has helped me promote this channel, and I would gladly take a bullet for him. Just not in the face, or in the gut, and not like a high caliber round, more like a 22 or a 38. Like a grazing hit, or a shot to the appendix or the love handles, preferably while I'm wearing full body armor. But go check out the Black Pants Legion after this video, because I'm about to depress you all to hell. Little Fears was published in 2001, again by Fun Sized Games. It was written by Jason Blair, who is not the Jason Blair who was publicly blacklisted by the New York Times for fabricating stories, but a different, much less ethically challenged Jason Blair. There are actually 3 editions, with the first edition followed up by the much less bleak, ironically named Nightmare Edition in 2007, and the Happy Birthday Little Fears, which brought back the original horror in the 10th Anniversary Edition in 2011. The game was nominated for Best RPG on its original release, and it did take home an award for Most Controversial, something the writer does warn you about. The concept behind Little Fears is there's another dimension called Closet Land where the monsters come from. Originally, the source of the evil that hunted children was called the Demagogue, and he hunted children with his 7 kings, each representing a different deadly sin. There's no way to sugarcoat this. Many of the kings represent the worst things that can happen to children. This game does not shy away from the evil of its villains. Titania, king of pride, steals children to keep herself young. The Boogeyman, the king of greed, wants the souls of all children. The king of envy wants to be like the children and becomes violent to them when he can't. The king of wrath represents child abuse. The king of sloth is child abandonment. The king of gluttony is a cannibal. And worst of all, the king of lust is a pedophile. That guy is the only one of the kings the game personally warns you about running. The game is very honest about the personified horrors facing children here. The rest of the monsters from the original edition are classic childhood and just legendary monsters. There's the monster under the bed, there's killer clowns, possessed dolls. Anything that can terrify a child is here. It's up to the children to fight the monsters. Adults don't believe in them and therefore can't see them. Defeating a monster is both easy yet difficult at the same time. What the child believes can hurt the monster can defeat it. The problem is figuring out what you believe can defeat it can be difficult. Staking a vampire or stabbing a werewolf with your mom's best silverware will kill the classic monster. But how do you defeat a killer doll or a psycho old man that lives next door in the creepy house? That requires the children to find the monster's weakness. Still, if a child believes that Wolfman's got nards, Wolfman's gonna have nards. That's because the children aren't helpless despite adults being useless. They have the power of belief. If a child can imagine something that will protect them or defeat the monster, there's a chance it can. The more innocent the child, the greater the chance their belief comes true. Innocence is a stat that gradually decreases with time and fear. If a child loses all their innocence, then they've given up on their childhood. Innocence is the most important stat in Little Fears. You have to cling to it for as long as possible, because if it goes away, you become blind to the monsters. The monsters eat innocence, destroy it through abuse, fear, and trauma. Worse, every year you age, your innocence slips away. There's no way of regaining it, unless the game master allows you to use an optional rule. But eventually it will go away. There's no stopping that. That means your character is on a timer. You have to defeat as many monsters as you can before you become an adult, or the monsters take away your childhood. It's a pretty dark game, like I said. Innocence powers your imagination, and that is one of the most powerful weapons against the monsters. If a child believes her teddy bear will defend her, she makes a belief check, and if she succeeds, the shadow monster that was trying to steal her soul is standing face to face with a button-eyed, full-grown Kodiak that is going to show the monster every way possible it doesn't bend. The more innocent the child, the more powerful the beliefs. This is reflected in the imagined defender's stats. The higher the innocence, the more powerful the imagined creature. One problem is belief also works backwards. If a child believes an action will have a negative effect, like stepping on a crack, if they perform the negative action, there's a chance that it too will manifest. The belief system is left up to the players. Each child can have different imaginary allies they can call on. One boy can call up the awesome superhero powers of the amazing Captain Dr. Professor Man to stop the spider demon, while a child that was raised watching reruns of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood might reveal to the cornfield monster why they called him Drop Dead Fred back in Nam as he hollows out the monster's skull from 1,000 yards away with his Barrett. The game encourages imagination. While the subject matter is grim, it's not bleak. The children are heroes in Little Fears, not victims. Mechanically, the system is rather simple. There's 5 stats, with a range of 1 to 5. The resolution is done through quizzes and tests. Quizzes are uncontested rolls, like trying to remember something or balancing on a skateboard. Roll a d6. If you roll equal or under the corresponding stat, you pass. If you have a relevant quality, then you roll 2 dice and take the best results. If you have a negative quality associated with a trait, roll another die and take the worst result. It's pretty much the advantage system from 5e, only a decade before 5e. Tests are contested rolls, in which case you and the target roll against each other's stat and try to beat their trait. If you roll higher than your opponent's trait, you succeed. If both of you succeed, whoever rolls the highest wins. In case of a tie, it's just a stalemate and nobody wins. You get an extra die for every quality that counts, though those can be hampered by low traits, which means the child has not reached their potential yet. You gain qualities both positive and negative in character creation. These vary in power, but all are a single point to acquire. Negative qualities give you additional points that you can raise traits or other qualities with, and the balance on a few of these are noticeable. A child with a loud voice gives you the same amount of points as one in a wheelchair. You can gain extra points by starting with fear and losing innocence, but those severely hamper starting characters. Combat is a test, with damage being the amount of damage plus a set weapon modifier. There's a wound chart, starting with Mommy, I feel sore, all the way to Mommy, I don't feel anything. A small rock does a base 1 point of damage, and a shotgun does a base 30 points of damage. Remember to keep your guns locked up and educate your kids on gun safety, people. Just a suggestion. The first and third editions do not shy away from the horrors of child abuse. While it doesn't go into graphic details about the many ways children suffer outside of the supernatural methods, it doesn't avoid them either. The various monsters love to torture children, and the method which the kings of Closetland steal a child's soul is pretty dark. Children do have allies. Animals can sense the monsters, and there's even guardian angels if a child believes strongly enough. Some adults can even see the monsters, but they're considered insane or mentally challenged. Still, if your crazy grandpa can still see the closet monster, he makes for a great ally. Other adults can be convinced to help, though it's very difficult and you need a rational explanation for the danger rather than just a demon-possessed my babysitter excuse. The Nightmare Edition tones down the horror quite a bit. It's still a horror game about children fighting monsters, but the incarnation of sexual abuse was left out of the book. It plays more like scary stories to tell in the dark, rather than baby's first pop-up Necronomicon. The mechanics system is more complex, replaced with target numbers and sustained test rather than the over-under system. Killing monsters is also more defined. Now they can be permanently killed with the power of belief. Second edition has a lot more detail in fighting the monsters, and while it's still a dark game, it's much more forgiving and a lot less soul-crushing. There's a lot of modules released for Little Fears, though only first and third editions are compatible with each other without some tweaking. The original version had 6 adventures published for it, and second edition had 9 along with 2 additional source books. All the source books are on DriveThruRPG as PDFs, and the Little Fears website has a store for physical products. Fair warning, their website does have a caveat that says physical copies take a long time to get printed because of real-life issues with shipping the books out. DriveThru doesn't seem to have any print on demand, so that can be problematic getting hard copies for your bookshelf. Little Fears is a difficult game for a lot of players. Games where children can and will die are tough sells to new players, especially parents. The second edition is a much easier sell for players because it takes out all the disturbing monsters that the original version introduced. The fact that adults can't help children is a major part of the game, but it can be frustrating. Making matters worse for getting players is that first and third don't have a system for advancement. In fact, your characters only get worse as they age. It might be easier to get younger players to join in a game because they don't have the adult fears that their parents do, but this exposes them to the same things we want to keep from them as long as possible. It's a unique game, and it's highly original. I won't deny that, but it's hard to run. If you're a game master, you're going to have a hard time building an adventure around facing off against the demon prince of pedophilia who wants to do horrible things to your player characters. Yeah, it's a monster that more than deserves to be destroyed. But good luck getting players to agree to that adventure. We are hardwired to protect children, even imaginary ones. More than a few people who have run the game can't keep a campaign going because they don't think about things like that. This makes the game better for one-shots, especially since the lack of advancement means your characters get worse after each adventure. I do suggest adding a system where you can convince adults about the monsters. It is gratifying to reveal to your parents the truth about the monster, especially if the parents suddenly remember their past trauma and want revenge. You're not going to find many people that would object to that, because protecting the wee ones is something ingrained into the psyches of most parents. Even though she's grown now, if anybody tried to hurt my little girl, I'd still feed him feet first through a wood chipper. Now I'm going back to the world of darkness for the next Mad Musings, as I'm almost finished with the initial run with Changeling the Dreaming, where it's a fine line between utter banality and complete bedlam. But until then, rest well, Fiona. I will see you on the shores of Anwen. Bydd ci da dichi.